Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
Here from the What the Heck is the Cloud Anyway department of .NET Rocks. Officially, that joke will make sense in just a minute.
Other people's computers.
It's the term that's been bandied about so badly. I just can't stand
Other people's computers.
Yeah. So why don't we roll the music and get everybody else in on the joke?
Okay. All right, dude, what do you got?
All right. So this is touted as the most innovative thing, like EE Times, Open Systems Media, TechCrunch, Home Toys, Startup Magazine, or whatever. I don't know what it is, but they're all going crazy about this thing. It's Antsle. ANTSLE. And if you go to 1495.pwop.me, you'll see this. Meet Antsle, the on-premises alternative for public cloud solutions like AWS. In other words, it's a server.
Instead of other people's computers, it's your computer.
It's your computer. Stop renting. This is what it says. Okay. Easily host from your home or office. The perfect interplay of hardware and software. Ready out of the box. Own it, set it, deploy it. Take back control. No more hosting fees. Keep your data local. So, okay. So it's an on-premise server. This is what it says. Freedom. With Antsle, you physically own your data and keep it local. Outsmart the giants. Enjoy unlimited room to experiment. Save money. It's more than just saving on monthly hosting fees. It's the peace of mind to create virtual servers at will anytime you want. Full control. We provide the tools. You decide what to do with it. Configure Antsle any way you want. You are in control, not Google or Amazon. So there you go. Now, this thing starts at, like less than $1,000 with nothing on it, and goes, you could spend $13,000 on this thing.
I'm going to presume there's a certain amount of software that provides as much, cloud as architecture as opposed to cloud as hardware.
Exactly. And, that's what they're going for. They have the software that lets you run every kind of server and do any kind of...
But it's still funny.
But it's still kind of a little bit
It's
funny.
A little funny.
I mean, wasn't that the whole idea that, except when it breaks, then what happens, Antsle? Should I buy 2 of them?
Well, at least 2, probably 4.
How would I sync them? Is there anything there? Don't know.
How do you scale them? Buy more.
Buy more.
There you go. That's funny, dude. I love it.
It's a little bit funny. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Well, and it is interesting. And I can't, I'm not going to totally make fun of them. I mean, there are some situations in which you would want an Antsle or a server with software on it. But, there it is. Who's talking to us, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1400. So roughly 100 shows ago with one Phil Haack when we were talking about rewriting critical code.
All right.
Great conversation. And this comment comes from Gareth Ashton, who said, a good discussion as always. I would like to add to the discussion around determining when to rewrite, because that was the big question. If you're taking code that works and risking it essentially by rewriting it, does it make a lot of sense?
Yeah.
The initial factor is usually it's costing more time to maintain than to build a new one, which most people won't argue with. The other points the guys bring up is about aging hardware, security risks, and all those things to factor in as well. However, even with all those factors considered, it seems logical to rewrite the system. The number one reason I see over and over again to not do it is opportunity cost. In other words, if you're going to rewrite, you need to focus your resources on rebuilding something that you essentially already have in order to get to the point where you can add something new. That translates to 0 new features for at least a few months, perhaps even years, while the new system is being built, which in today's climates, most companies can't sustain. The way forward I've found is parallel development. You keep your current system and you keep releasing new features for your current system, but you maintain a separate but integrated dev path rewriting in the new chosen technology. Yes, there is more cost, but if that cost is factored into the initial cost, then you have a formula to determine the correct course of action. Yeah, there's a certain amount of side-by-side that has to happen here. You can't stop development on the current app, especially when you talk about stuff like security vulnerabilities and the like.
Right.
And parallel development gets very challenging. It's more people, it's more time, and it's frustrating to see the old app getting further away at times when the new app is still trying to catch up with that core feature set that you keep adding to. But it's subtle to figure out the right ways to do those things. And often we go through several generations behind so that the new tools and the new techniques allow us to build that application that much quicker, and we can actually overtake it.
Yep.
So Gareth, thank you so much for your comment. A .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Google Plus and Facebook. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And definitely follow us on Twitter. I'm at Carl Franklin. He's at Rich Campbell. Send us a tweet. We store them on our Ansel.
Then we scale them up. There's tweets everywhere.
I'm drowning in tweets over here. All right, let's bring out Phil Haack. Phil works at GitHub as Director of Client Apps, a group that consists of the desktop, Atom, Electron, and Editor Tools teams. Prior to that, he was a senior program manager at Microsoft, responsible for shipping ASP.NET MVC and NuGet. These projects were released under open source licenses and helped serve as examples to other teams for how to ship open source software. He regularly writes for his blog at hacked.com, HAACKED, and tweets random observations on Twitter as @hacked. He also speaks at conferences here and there and has quit writing technical books forever several times now. Welcome back, Phil.
Great to be here, gentlemen.
Yes, we had to get our fill of Phil, and then we got hacked.
This is where we're going to go, huh?
No.
This is recording on a Friday afternoon right here.
There's always new stuff going on at GitHub, and I feel like we have to reach out to you every once in a while just to find out what's new.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's great to talk about GitHub.
Yeah, I imagine you don't get tired of talking about GitHub, do you?
Not at all. Not at all. You know, I was thinking regards to that comment about parallel development. That's effectively what we did when we rewrote our desktop applications. There's the double opportunity cost of, any amount of time you spend on the old one, you're not spending on the new one. So we ended up just doing security fixes and critical fixes. A few little features here and there, but for the most part, kind of over time transition all the future development to the new clients. And we just recently shipped what we're calling our 1.0 for the Electron-based desktop application. Yeah. So we're finally deprecating the old clients. We're going to keep supporting them for a little while, but our hope is eventually we get everyone to the new client.
But if you go to desktop.github.com, that app is an Electron app.
Correct. Yeah. So we did the rewrite, and so far, it seems to have been successful in terms of like the overall goal and mission of why we did it and doing it for the right reasons and all that. But yeah, it's definitely not something that's just, it's not something that you just go into willy-nilly.
What was the original desktop app written in, especially for Windows?
The Windows one was WPF and C#, and the Mac one was Objective-C and Cocoa.
And now everything is JavaScript, HTML, CSS.
Pretty much. Well, on the desktop.
Yeah, written in for Electron, right? That's the coding environment for Electron is JavaScript deliberately.
Yes.
I don't know as if we've really talked about Electron all that much on the show. It's a GitHub technology, right? It was Atom Shell?
Yes, it was formerly called Atom Shell, and we realized that caused confusion because, it was basically the Atom Shell could be used to build any kind of application, not just Atom. That's how it started. It's basically extracted from Atom. And we're like, hey, this might be useful to other people. And so now, you have apps like our desktop application, in addition to Atom, built on Electron. Microsoft has several apps, obviously, VS Code, Microsoft Teams. Mm-hmm. All of these are built on Electron. And what's cool is that, in a little interplay with Microsoft technologies is we use TypeScript for the desktop application. And we had a really good time. I think some of my colleagues are major fans of Anders Heilsberg.
How can anybody not be a fan of Anders Heilsberg?
Yeah, really.
The guy's just a giant pile of awesome.
That's right.
Yep. Before we get off Electron, what are some limitations of it? I mean, the things that come to mind might be that anything that's like native I/O, but does it have access to audio system, let's say, or?
Yeah. So the base Electron is Node running in Chromium.
Right.
You have access to pretty much anything, on the machine through bridges to those technologies. And if there's anything you don't have access, the team works on making those APIs accessible. So you can do, for specific things, you might have to do conditionals. So, if I'm running on a Mac OS, access this thing that only belongs to Mac OS.
Yeah.
But for the most part, what we try to do is have abstractions for all the most common things, audios and stuff. I would say the main limitation is if you need to use the very latest operating system technology and look and feel,
Right.
Electron tends to lag a little bit behind, but not that far. For example, the recent Macs came out with the touch bar, and we added touch bar support not long after that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the apps tend to be, I think some of the early Electron apps, people just kind of took a website and just cut and paste it in there.
Sure, yeah.
And I think you won't get necessarily the best responsive environment that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever try taking a look at the desktop environment, you'll see that it's really snappy and responsive, and it feels like a native application. You can kind of tell in some ways it's an Electron app because it has a slightly different look and feel than maybe your typical Windows app.
Yeah.
But in some ways, I think that's also a good thing. I think it's a really good example of an app that was designed with Electron in mind from the ground up.
Yeah.
And that, combined with React, combined with TypeScript, ended up being a very productive environment for the team. You probably have a lot of web developers, and that it's really nice being able to view source, hot reload, all that stuff that you do with web development. Doing that for a desktop app ends up being really productive.
I'm sorry, did you say you used React and TypeScript in Electron to build the desktop app?
Yes.
That's cool, huh?
Because isn't there also the React native path too?
Yeah, so we didn't use React Native. I don't think that would make as much sense because Electron really is about hosting the DOM.
Right.
But experimenting with React Native in Electron is something that you've probably had him on the show before. Paul Betts has played around with.
Oh, yeah.
And I haven't followed up with him to see, well, how did that go?
Yeah.
He's always trying to push the envelope with, wild ideas.
Well, and React Native is really focused on mobile rather than just everywhere.
Yeah.
But in theory.
Exactly. And what's nice, like if you're building a mobile app, React Native is definitely very compelling because it's the same programming paradigms, programming model that you would do if you've already have React experience.
Right.
It's just that your components aren't rendering DOM elements, they're rendering, native elements instead on whatever device. So that's definitely, an interesting area. So we're big fans of React. We found it to be really productive for our needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very cool stuff. And it's always interesting to hear, I'm going to hesitate to say reference app, but it's like you guys are pretty experienced software developers and you're maintaining, the desktop app for a long time for a lot of people. Your choice of tooling speaks volumes, I think.
Yep. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and I really hope that for folks who are building an Electron desktop app from the ground up, I hope they take a look at what the team's done with the desktop app and use that as at least one reference point for the type of thing you do. Because Atom, I think, is difficult to serve as a reference point because not everyone's writing a text editor. And, Atom it's very deep in terms of what it has to do.
Right.
Desktop is more of a standard, I wouldn't say typical, but typical desktop application.
Yeah.
And the source is all in GitHub, I bet.
Yeah, it's all open source.
Yeah.
You sure you're not going to put it in SourceForge? I'm just asking.
You're so funny, Richard Campbell.
I think Phil left an easy one on the table there. He could have said, oh, no, it's in Coplex.
You go to Codeplex and says, we've moved.
To GitHub. That's what makes that funny.
Yeah.
What else have you been working on, Phil? Because I know you guys have got some interesting projects sort of broadening the horizons of GitHub.
Yeah, so recently, one of the things we announced was we're calling it an alpha, but we've been writing a GitHub extension for Unity, and that is written in C#, and it's open source as well. It's out there to try. We're not quite yet where we'd consider beta, in part because unlike the Visual Studio extension that we built, there wasn't already Git support in Unity. There wasn't any GUI for Git in Unity, so we've had to actually build the Git part as well as the GitHub part. And we're doing it with a fairly small team, and so it's been slow going, but I'm hoping to pick that up in the coming years. We're doing planning for what we want to accomplish next year. But it's great if you are a game developer, or as I was just at the Unite conference, which is a conference Unity puts on in all over the world, but this one was in Austin. And I'm seeing that Unity is very popular among the VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality crowd.
Sure.
And I think that is extending beyond games in quite a big way. So we saw a demo where it was some folks who did this demo for Cadillac. And so you put on the goggles and then you're standing right next to the Cadillac and you could switch out the rims and the color and all these different elements. And you could stick your head through the car and look inside or teleport inside.
Wow.
And just check out all elements of it. And it was really interesting experience. Like, the only thing missing obviously is I can't actually drive it. But in terms of browsing cars, if I was in the market to buy a car, that is such a great way to look at cars. And so,
sure, yeah.
Yeah, I could see that, if you are not a game developer, a typical app developer, working for corporate clients, there may come a time where something like VR, AR falls into your lap of, hey, we need something. Can you build it? And Unity would be a great tool for that. There's the whole 3D modeling aspect, but then you can, script it with C#.
Right.
And what our extension does is it adds Git support into it, but also support for something called Git LFS, Git Large File System.
Okay.
And why is that necessary?
So the interesting thing, if you're a game developer, and this is one area where the workflows for game developers is fairly unique compared to web developers and whatnot, because they're often dealing with very, very large binary assets, right? Like these 3D models, these textures and all this. And these files, if you put them in Git, that's going to quickly inflate your Git repo to an unwieldy size. And in general, these things, you pretty much have to store each version of them because you can't take a really large image file and merge it with another really large image file, at least not practically.
Right.
And so what ends up happening is you want to keep those files outside of Git. And so GitHub built this technology called what we call Git LFS. And that at the very simplest thing, it's you mark what file types you want to exclude from the repo and store in Git LFS instead. And so when you commit these files, instead of committing them to the Git repo, what it does is it uploads to whatever host you've configured. So, like AWS or Azure. And it uploads a file there, and then it just commits a pointer, a little text file that points to where the file actually is.
Can I upload it to Ansel?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, to your Ansel cluster.
As you do.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to get hate mail now.
I think, serverless computing has become this thing, and I think they're rebelling against that, and they're going to come out with the term serverful computing.
Are you tired of serverless computing? I'm ready for something new.
Yeah. Don't you miss the good old days when you had to hire an IT team?
Visit your spinning metal in a co-location center.
Blinky lights and spinning discs. You'll feel better.
Hey, guys, just hold that thought right there while we take just a minute to hear a word from our sponsors. Hey, Rockheads, this is Carl. Have you tried JetBrains Rider? It's a new cross-platform .NET IDE that's light yet powerful and comes from the makers of ReSharper, IntelliJ, IDEA, and WebStorm. You can write .NET code on Windows, Mac, or Linux. Rider has you covered. Rider helps you develop ASP.NET, .NET Core, .NET Framework, Xamarin, and Unity applications. Most languages used in .NET development are supported, from C#, VB.NET, F#, and XAML to ASP.NET Razor syntax, JavaScript, TypeScript, and all that other front-end stuff. It comes with navigation, thousands of code inspections, refactorings, unit testing, debugging, rich coding assistance, and more advanced IDE features powered by proven technology from ReSharper and WebStorm. Download Rider now and take it for a 30-day trial at rider.dotnetrocks.com. That's rider.dotnetrocks.com. All right, we're back. You're listening to .NET Rocks, Carl Franklin, Richard Campbell. We're here with Phil Haack. We're talking GitHub and GitHub clients and Unity and all that good stuff. And I'm sorry if I cut you off in the middle of something important you were going to say.
Oh, well, I was about to go on a digression because you mentioned we were talking about servers and co-location, and I have to tell you the story. Do you all remember Digex?
Digex,
like Exodus, Digex, they're hosting providers.
No, I don't.
This can't be before your time. So back in the early days of the web, if you needed to host a website for a large client, you either go to Exodus and Digex and either pay for their servers or have your own servers, co-located there. And Digex, if you recall, had those commercials with Shaquille O'Neal, and he's in a leotard and he's twirling, like ribbons.
Wasn't that WorldCom?
No, Digex. Yeah. You have to look this up. I'm pretty sure it's Digex.
Okay.
The reason why I remember this is at the time I was working at a consulting company, and our client was Charles Schwab, and we'd been doing these marketing sites for them and hosting them at Digex. And the Lakers won the World Championship. They're like, hey, as a little thing, we've got some extra tickets to Shaquille O'Neal's, celebration that we're throwing for him, winning the World Championship. So me and a few of my colleagues got to go to this party where Shaquille O'Neal was there, and I didn't see Kobe, unfortunately, but oh god, what was his name? Other player, but there was a couple of other Lakers there, and Shaquille walked right by me when we were on the dance floor, and I kid you not, it felt like his fingers kind of brushed against my shoulder, but his arm was fully down. You know what I mean? Like he's just that giant.
Yeah, he's a tall individual.
Big guy. Oh, I see. Digex was acquired by WorldCom in 2001. That's why I got them.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So these are all like the original ISPs pre-dot-com boom, right? The mid 90s, and they all, most of them imploded by 2001.
Yeah, and maybe Ansel is hearkening back to those days.
Good call.
I'm gonna feel real bad. I bet I don't even know what you're talking about, to be honest. Like I just heard the description, and it may be something that much cooler than I'm giving credit for, and I'll have to look it up afterwards.
Doesn't mean it isn't funny.
Repentance.
I don't want to go away from Unity. Just my time with the gaming industry. GitHub is about text files, right? I mean, the whole ability to merge, to have distributed modification of the same file simultaneously and be able to resolve that, that doesn't make sense and really on the digital asset level, does it?
No, it doesn't. And that's one of the challenges that game developers have with working with GitHub, right? Like there's, GitHub works great and Git works great for all the code files, but all the digital assets, it doesn't. And the thing that
the digital assets have to have metadata files associated with them.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have metadata files, and then and the other thing is, like, if two people accidentally are working on the same binary asset, and they try to merge them into the same branch, it's going to be, tears and heartaches for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And so one of the features we support with the GitHub extension for Unity is file locking. So you can indicate like, hey, I'm working on this file and lock it across all branches. And that way, like, nobody can work on it. It's kind of, I know when I say that, people like, oh, isn't that like...
It's kind of diametrically opposed to everything you guys stood for when it came to source control management. Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. Yeah, it sounds like a little bit like Visual Source Safe days, but...
A file system. Wait a minute. Fellas, it's a file system.
I got this idea. We'll take these files and we'll store them.
Yeah, we'll have locks.
This whole show is going to be crazy callbacks to the way we used to do stuff.
And we'll request access to write.
Yeah, like everything old is new again, gentlemen.
And it'll be wonderful. We'll live together forever.
It's log.
We have to do this like Apple, right? We have this new original concept, ILock.
Yeah, ILock. Exactly.
Well, I mean, I feel like this reflects, there is this trend I've seen in the tech industry where like something new comes along and it solves this huge swath of problems for a lot of people. And then everyone gets really on board and it becomes the way, the doctrine. And then in doing so, you've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and you've forgotten that, well, there may be cases where that approach does not work. And I think with very large files, that is a good example of one where, like, branching and merging, which is so powerful for people writing code, doesn't exactly work. Now, one thing I've learned, though, is like blocking a file across all branches, for a lot of workflows may be too heavy-handed, right? And so we're, meeting with game developers and people working in this space and trying to really understand the workflows and make it even better for them so that, when they're working together with developers who are writing the code and you have the 3D model and the composers writing music and all that we can kind of put together a workflow that works for everybody involved. And
when you just want to lock for write, you don't need to lock for read.
Oh, yeah, of course. Lock for write. That's exactly right. Yeah, because, ultimately, if two people modify that file in significant ways at the same time and try to merge them, there's really not much they can do. In some cases, they'd have to coordinate, look at, what changes were you trying to make? What changes were I trying to make it? And then reapply those changes. There's nothing, there's not going to be any automatic way. Like, you're not going to get that beauty of the Git merge where it just understands how to merge the text appropriately in most cases. And you even get conflicts in text, but even when you get a conflict in text, you can kind of...
Yeah. GitHub tends to get you right down to the line of conflict and go, here are the two versions. This is the line I can't resolve myself. What do you want to do?
Yep.
Right. And you don't want to do that, on a really large 3D model or image file. Like, it'd just be littered with conflict.
I mean, they do appreciate the good tooling is going to allow, if two people do something like that, to say, hey, you've both changed this. It's different than the one, both of them are different from the one before, and they're different from each other. Just wanted to let you know you're in hell. Thanks very much, right? As opposed to what would have happened with a traditional file system, which is whoever wrote last one.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Last one in.
And fail silently, right?
Right. And then the person who had just made changes prior had no idea, right? Or they find out later, like, hey, what happened to my changes? Oh,
exactly.
Richard committed over them. Damn it.
Yeah.
And it's destroyed, right? I mean, I just like a good tool will just keep all the versions so you can always get back, which is something GitHub's always done with source code, that you can always get back to a known good state. Mm-hmm. So same discipline around large files. Like that's a feature, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is now?
Must be that happy time again.
Yeah, it's time to reflect on Haack's Shack Attack.
Oh.
In which basketball star Shaquille O'Neal brushed his digexes on Phil's cold shoulder.
He writes them fast, my friend Carl Franklin. He writes them fast.
Haack Shack Attack. It's actually time to give away a DXperience subscription from DevExpress to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best, without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM and state controllers like Redux. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. You can check it out and test it for free on GitHub. And learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
All right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Andy Leggett.
Congratulations, Andy.
Yeah.
Golf clap for you, sir.
And Andy just won the DXperience subscription, a great big pile of awesome from our friends at DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world. In every show, we like to give away stuff from our sponsors, and every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. But you have to sign up to win. And of course, Phil, it's your turn. I can't remember what you said last time, but if you had $5,000 to spend today on technology, what would you buy?
I would get a VR headset and a HoloLens.
No kidding.
Do you want the new Samsung one? That's supposed to be very Windows-centric.
Yeah, the new ones that are coming out, I was, the tracking is now built into the headset rather than having to set up towers in your house. So that I haven't picked up anything because I've been kind of waiting for something like that to come out. So
yeah, clearly getting better.
Would you be into making a HoloLens client for GitHub so we could just wave our arms or something or poke something and that would send up a branch or, make a fork gesture or something?
Yeah, funny enough, we were just talking about this, like GitHub for VR. Nice. You could actually see the branches and you could just drag them together and merge them, by dragging them in 3D space. And if there's a merge conflict, it would all fall apart and there'd be this 3D rotating poo emoji.
Exactly. And you could do like the transporter effect from Star Trek with the poo and just have, stars flying all over the place.
As much as you guys are mocking this, I'd like to bring up the idea. This is something Carl and I have talked about a number of times on stage as the keynotes, that today's developer working on their desktop machine is no longer building for their machine. They're building for a mobile device or any other number of different kinds of device.
Yep. Because who runs Windows apps anymore?
Yeah.
Jeez. Oy vey.
With VR, we could, for the first time in a long time, be back to I could be coding in the environment I'm coding for. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if it provides a significant advantage.
Yeah. I saw this demo that Google, I think it's Google, it's called Blocks, and it's 3D modeling within, a VR environment, and you could drag shapes or do open brushes and, draw things and then manipulate it with all these different tools, change colors, all that stuff. But for creating a 3D model, like for a game or whatever, is really difficult. And this made it seem like really easy. It, conceptually just makes sense of how you would model, at least get the initial prototype model for a 3D model for a game, and then you could post-process it to make it look really nice.
Yeah. And
they had some really cool 3D models that they showed off there that people had made in the app. And I was telling my daughter about that, and she got real excited. She's like, oh, yeah, I want to draw in 3D.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of then the bits and pieces of code, you're literally touching the 3D object and giving it a rule. And now it changes behavior. It's something very Matrix-like. Mm-hmm. To sort of drop into a null space and then bring in a landscape and then instantiate some objects and then give those objects rules and capabilities.
Yeah, what you're describing is pretty much like what Unity is these days. Like they had this thing called I'm going to mess up the name, Camera Magic. I don't know, Cinemagic or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like they added this feature probably a couple versions back, but like it just brings intelligent camera control in. So you just tell it like what kind of camera you want. Oh, I just want you to follow this. But you think a follow camera should be really simple, but you get sick if it like immediately follows and whatnot. It has to lag slightly. So if something accelerates, it has to kind of pull back and then slowly, catch up or things like that. Like if something moves right or left, it has to, there's these rules that good cinematographers know that the average programmer probably doesn't. And just by saying, hey, I want this camera to be a follow cam or overhead cam, it like knows all the rules already and you can tweak it. And so that sort of level of programming is really interesting, right? Where like it's really realizing the vision of code reuse and object-oriented programming back in the day, right? Where these things are...
I found the device. It's called Cinemachine.
Cinemachine,
that's it. Thank you.
Yes. Unified Procedural Camera.
Yeah, like I was pretty blown away by some of the stuff they had. And they also showed off Neil Blomkamp, the director of District 9, created a short film with a little studio he has in Vancouver, completely using Unity. And it's called Adam, A-D-A-M. It's really interesting.
Okay.
It's very cool. And I think, as much as we were making fun, we're approaching this ability to simply work and think in 3D as developers.
Be fun.
Yeah, I could definitely, I may be too early for GitHub for VR just yet, but I could definitely, see us, exploring that space at some point.
Visual Studio for HoloLens, perhaps?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. I imagine that, then Visual Studio integrates pretty well with Unity or vice versa, right?
Yeah. It's all C# in the end.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thing? I mean, I guess large file storage for gaming, it's just about managing all those digital assets. Are there other elements of actually having good source management for a game?
I think that's the part that's unique that I got a sense of, right? Because a lot of the work was manipulating these models in the Unity editor.
Right.
And so that's all either settings in a YAML file under the hood or actual digital 3D models. And then like a lot of times if you need to tweak the behavior of anything, you would add these script files, and those were C# files, and you double click on that and then it actually launches Visual Studio. Now you're writing C#.
Right.
Yep.
And just working within the environment. There's always lots of discussion going on about when is Microsoft going to buy Unity. And I couldn't answer that question because you sort of wobble back and forth on.
I really hope they don't, actually.
Well, we said the same thing about Xamarin.
Yeah.
I guess it remains to be seen how well does the Xamarin acquisition play out over the long run, and it seems to be doing really well.
Yeah. Does it actually make it better? I mean, I'm happy that Miguel Diaz is inside of Microsoft now, that mind is working on problems that Microsoft has, not just that Xamarin has. But I think, to Carl's point, when he sort of hesitates on that, it's like, would it make it better or does it make it worse, harder?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, they are very different products and for very different things. And I mean, I like the fact that they work together closely with Microsoft, but I don't know. I think about other things that Microsoft has bought and then became more Microsofty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's hard to name names though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, Skype, right? Maybe.
It would only make sense if they saw a way of driving more traffic to Azure as a result of buying it, right? Because, Unity targets something like 40 platforms, and it would really harm Unity to stop doing that. So clearly it's not build games for Xbox and Windows play. It would have to be we can find a way where game developers are hosting more of their stuff on Azure because, Unity makes that really easy now because we bought it.
Right.
And Unity is building their own cloud services for game developers as well. So it could, that could well be, something where they say, well, why don't you just use Azure for that?
And there is a lot of code that the Unity guys have to write to create a hosting environment that Visual Studio could take on. If you take Visual Studio and add a 3D rendering engine and an asset management tool for larger resources and some workflow pieces, you're pretty close to there for what Unity does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we're off the beaten path a little bit there, but it is fascinating to me. I mean, obviously the two ecosystems are living happily together, and I think Unity is getting more and more important because it seems to be the way for VR and HoloLens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting when Microsoft chooses to work with partners versus when they choose to acquire, and what triggers that, right? Because I think it's really important for them to continue partnering with folks and letting partners know that this is a good environment to partner in,
sure.
Right? As an example, GitHub for Visual Studio, right? We've partnered with them to, add GitHub feature sets directly in Visual Studio. And that's, I think that's good for Microsoft, for others to see that, oh, look, this third-party company can build really great experiences within their top-of-the-line editor.
Right.
But I'd also point out, in my experience dealing with M&A, there is no acquired company that wasn't first a partner. It is a very normal path. You have to be friends before you get married. That is how it works. So it doesn't always work out that way, and it's not necessarily that intention. It's just that wherever you see an acquisition, you see a working relationship that went on for some time first.
Yeah.
What about the GitHub extensions for Visual Studio? Because I thought for a long time, especially when you first went to GitHub, it was about building the desktop pieces and so forth, rather than going directly into Studio.
Yeah, well, when I first joined, the vision I had was that we wanted to, or at the time I felt that developers in the Microsoft space, .NET developers and whatnot, were underrepresented on GitHub. A lot has changed since then, obviously.
Yeah,
no
a little
kidding.
bit.
I think in part because of, I'd like to think some of the work we did helped create an environment more conducive to the horde of .NET developers coming in, but clearly the move of, ASP.NET Core, all that, the climate under Satya has definitely created this environment where when Microsoft's doing all its development in GitHub, like a lot of their audience is going to follow. So it's been very good in that regard. And so, my job has been, okay, let's be on the other end, welcoming all these developers with open arms. And the GitHub for Visual Studio extension was sort of one aspect of that. And so one of the features that I'm really proud of that we just released, it's not quite where we want it to be yet, but it gives you a taste of the type of experience we think Visual Studio developers would want, which is what we call inline comments.
Okay.
So right now, if you go into the Team Explorer thing, when you're in a GitHub repo, assuming you have our extension installed and you're authenticated to it, there's a pull request button there, and you can click that. You see a list of pull requests, and you can double click on a pull request to check it out. And so you'll check out that pull request branch. Mm-hmm. But you can also, like in the pull request, list which files have changed and click on a file and see what comments have been made inline on the diff.
Cool.
For that change. So right in Visual Studio, using their diff viewer, we were able to extend it and add inline comments from the PRs. And then you can add comments right from Visual Studio, right from the diff. Say, you know what, actually, I don't like this change, or whatever you want to say, right?
Right.
Where we're going with that, though, is we would like it, and we have an experimental branch, and we're not really talking about this a whole lot yet, but if you're in a editor and you're working on a file, but you're on a branch that has a PR associated with it, that if a comment comes in, it would show a little comment thing would show up in the gutter, and then you could click it and expand it, and you could see it right in line with your code as you're coding.
That's cool.
Well, and you're thinking like near real time. So if a bunch of people are fussing over a particular feature and you've got that feature open while you're working on it, you would see the conversation going on effectively.
Yeah. We wouldn't have it like suddenly pop up all the comments. Ideally, it'll be very subtle, like a little in the gutter, little comment bubbles will show up of
little ping.
Yeah, and
it lets you know they're talking about you.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, I better, I'm working on that line of code, and I noticed someone comment on it. I better see what they're saying. Expand it. You could reply right back. Ideally, you'd be able to comment on code as you're writing it too, like say, I don't want this comment in the code. This is more relevant to the reviewer of the code. Just go ahead and, click it, comment it, and then when I push, all those comments go up. We're not there yet. I want to be very clear. We have a lot of both user experience challenges and also, we have some changes we would have to make on the back end. Like as an example, today, if you are in a PR, you can only comment on lines that have changed.
Yeah.
And on one hand, that kind of makes sense. If these are the lines that changed, that's what you want to review. But on the other hand, like it would be nice if you could comment on arbitrary lines, because you might be like, hey, I noticed you made this change here. Why didn't you make that change on this line? And you might want to comment that line. And so we're going to have to work with other teams at GitHub to expand the support in the API in order to enable these scenarios. But that's kind of where we want to get to, where as you're coding and people are reviewing this code, you have that context right there and you can respond to that conversation right from Visual Studio. And I think that would be a very powerful way to work. And today, like we just have it in the diff view, but if you try it out, it's a real nice experience even there, like being able to see the latest review right from Visual Studio without having to context switch back and forth from the browser to Visual Studio.
Right.
Now, it's not going to be as full an experience of reviewing a PR from GitHub.com. So like if you're in the mindset, I'm ready to review code, like maybe you do want to go to GitHub.com.
Right.
But the nice thing about being in Visual Studio is that, you can run the code as you're reviewing it and things like that, which is generally what you want to do, right? I don't want to just review code. I want to run it and make sure that it does what I think it does.
Yeah, I mean, that's the normal development cycle, that write a little, run a little, make an edit, run it again. Like everything we can do to shorten up that loop makes us more productive, right? Like it's important.
Yeah, and that's the goal. That's the goal with GitHub for Visual Studio is we want to tighten that loop. But recognize that other people are in that loop, that you're not alone. And how can we, tighten the end-to-end loop, not just your loop of write code run, but your loop of write code, get some feedback run.
Well, and your basic concept here of two people are talking or somebody's chatting about a feature you are literally looking at the code on, you need to be aware of that.
Yeah, or if that code changes, right? Someone pushes a change that affects that code, why wait till you push to find out that there's a conflict? What if we told you right then and there? That's the kind of thing. And I get real excited about this. I want to point out this is also open source on GitHub. And so if folks get excited about wanting to help out, we do take contributions.
All right.
So really open source. You will take people's pull requests.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We've had some folks have implemented stuff that we just wanted but weren't going to get around to. So it's been great to receive contributions. We know that working on an extension of Visual Studio is a bit daunting. So we're not getting a huge amount of contributions, but when we do, it's very much appreciated.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
Good stuff. When I was looking for things to talk about for Better Know Framework, my original thought was, somebody has to have hooked up some hardware like a joystick or buttons or sliders or something to GitHub for the client just to do pull requests. Like, can you imagine having a lever for a pull request? Pull! Some fun things like that. And man, I didn't find anything. I mean, it's all about, you can't say GitHub buttons because those are buttons, on the screen.
Right.
But I thought that would be fun.
GitHub branded hardware.
Yeah, I could see Clemens Vasters getting like an B-2 bomber cockpit controller.
the big engine controls from that center plant. It's funny, the physical hardware around source code. Do you remember the Nabaz tag, the little bunny rabbit that was like a early cloud service?
Yep.
And one of the things you could do is tie it to your build process, so it would do silly things when you broke the build, it would sort of indicate where it was in the build process. And it's all dead now, right? They've gone broke and so forth. I bumped into one the other day where it's been gutted and they put Arduino hardware in it so they could bring it back to life.
That's so funny. Huh.
That's interesting.
But, I think it's one of the problems we have as developers is that our stuff's so cerebral. It's just like organizing electrons. Anytime you can create a physical manifestation of the things that we make, I think it's kind of important, whether, breaking the build or showing we're in test or the new version deployed, any visualization, any physical representation, it makes a difference for people.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember when people used to have like old school traffic lights hooked up to their build. So you see that. But I think one of the challenges it becomes like, well, which build do you hook to your traffic light? Because I have 20 builds going on for 20 different, things that we're building, right? And so
how many blinky light distractions do we want in the room too,
Right.
Well, and one of the manifestations there is what I liked about having the physical. I did this with the Nabaz tag. You see the build get broken, so the bunny's ears goes down. You don't do a sync. You don't grab that broken code, so you continue to develop, right? Before you grab, you take a look at the bunny. Oh, the bunny's sad. I'm going to keep working on my branch here. I'm not. You're the one person still working because you looked at the bunny.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
So what's next, man? What are you working on now besides, more GitHub client stuff?
I have some stuff in the works that I can't talk about just yet, but...
Oh, go on. No, I'm kidding.
We're all about you limiting your career, Phil.
Just us. Just a couple guys hanging out. Nobody's listening.
We wouldn't tell anybody, man.
Come on.
I mean, the general theme of the work that I and my teams are doing is really extending GitHub beyond the browser. Like for a lot of people, GitHub is this website and it's Git, right? Pushing to a website. And we want to extend GitHub beyond the browser, beyond the command line, and support more workflows, right? Like you have a lot of folks who are developers working on code, but you also have a lot of folks who are contributing to software but aren't actually writing code. They may be, artists, writers, documentation writers, all that stuff. And so a lot of, what we're thinking about as we move forward is what can we do to help those folks out? One thing the Adam team, so Adam is our text editor we mentioned earlier, built on Electron, is working on is really cool. They've been working on real-time collaborative editing. sort of the Google Docs experience within Atom. And the idea would be that you could connect with anyone on GitHub and say, hey, I could use your help on this code. Start a session, and you both have a cursor and you're editing in the same text file at the same time. And it's cool because it uses this technology called CRDTs, which I just blanked on what that stands for. There's a sort of the lead architect is Nathan Sobo, and he's the one who understands this technology way better than me. But it's really great because there's a lot of interesting challenges when you start building this, right? For example, what does Control Z do? Can you make sure that it only undoes my changes and not your changes? And little things like that. How do you deal with high latency environments? And the cool thing about CRDTs is that you're sending like how things are changing over the wire back and forth. Like you might go through GitHub to figure out who you can connect with, but we'll try to set up a peer-to-peer connection. And you'll be sending these change sets back and forth. And if there's latency and they get backed up, that's fine, because once they get through, they're kind of like Git divs. They're just applying these little, micro patches so that the file's changing in a smart way. And we have a lot of pair programmers within the Atom team. So for them, this is something they're really excited about because this is going to change how they work together. And, we think there'll be a lot of situations where like people may want to write code at the same time, for work, for pairing sessions, for teaching, who knows, right? We'll find out. But this is something that we'll be announcing fairly soon. So we should have I don't know what date we'll have an alpha out, but we're going to have something out that people can play with and try it out.
Very, very cool. Thanks, Phil. It's always great to talk to you. And sorry we got to wrap it up, but I got a BBS to log into.
I gotta find me a working dial-up modem and an RJ11 jack because I don't have either one of them anymore.
I don't even have a phone.
I can't
on the wall.
I gotta see how my Space Wars ships are doing.
Oh, so much fun. Thanks again, Phil. We'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1. Recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.